We started with the bear last week. I think I showed you a couple of finished ones that I did. I went ahead and painted some that I had made years ago, but I never got around to getting them finished. So let me just do a little bit of show off here. Here's one that I did. Peter, I'll let you record there. Here's showing it to the wrong camera. Boy, that's a problem I always have, how to get the right camera going. So here's one of them that I did. He's just a guy with his hands in his pocket. Nothing fancy about these. They're ones that I've done before. Had this one sitting around for a while, and I didn't paint them. I got a new router, so my bases look better this time too. So I'm getting better bases with the edges routed. I did this guy, and I like the tie that I made for him. It came out pretty good. Just different size circles. Here's another one with a bow tie, dotted bow tie, sorry, got lines on it. And so we're doing this with the intention of making it making a Bear Librarian, but you can turn this into anything. And so I want to do one where he's a bartender. So, but you know, the little details transferred to just about anything. So if you want to put him as a bear on vacation, so he's on the beach with his flip-flops and his Bermuda shorts and his shirt or whatever he's going to do. But this project is customizable, I like to say, because you can do just about anything you want. Okay. Here's where we left off last time. You know, I had carved a little bit of that, and we ended up here. So we had carved the legs. We drew out the arms, but we didn't draw a whole lot. Let me see if I can get some of that light to go down. New camera, new lighting, so. Now step over everything. It's a little better. Anyway, that's where we started, and over the last few days, I've worked on one of my own little one that I've been working on. I did put a book in here so I could practice doing the same thing with this one. So if you haven't already, go ahead and draw in the arms. Make sure you leave room for that book. We're gonna need that book there. Let me draw that in a little bit more. So I'm only going to put one under that arm. I'm not going to do one on this arm. So we did the legs. We did the pants around the legs. We haven't done anything with the jacket, and we haven't done anything with the head. So about right now, I'm going to. All right, please don't forget to mute yourself, please, so we can have. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to start working on this head, because we want to go from this block here that you see on the camera. Let me put a piece of paper back there to see if it'll focus a little better. There we go. That looks a little better. So we're gonna go from here to here on the head part, at least. Try to round that out. Try to get those shapes. So center line is important. When I'm doing especially when I'm doing a project like this where I'm showing people, I always put a center line so that you can see the process. Where are we going and how are we getting there? Somewhere over here we have ears on this side. And then here's the snout right here. And so I'm going to start, here's the snout. And if we go back, we have the eye socket. And then we go above that, we have the ears. And then we're going to round the head. Now again, this is more of a cartoonish head rather than a and a caricature rather than a realistic looking bear. I saw a bear in an antique shop just the other day, and I almost picked it up because I liked the face, and I thought, well, I like what I do, and I don't want to get too far away from that. So I'm just going to take a knife, and I'm going to just cut these lines straight back. So I'm going to cut from here all the way back to this first plane here. And that's a fairly easy one to do. Draw that as big or as round as you want, depending on which bear you're carving. You might be carving a polar bear. You could be carving a brown bear. You could be carving a black bear. All of them have different shaped snouts. So just choose whichever one you want. And I'm just going to start carving. It's a cross grain, so it can be a little bit hard to do, but it's really not that hard if you've got good wood. So all I'm doing is trying to remove that wood from that snout so you can see what I'm doing right here. I'm just going back to where I can see the shape of that mouth. And I do both of them at the same time. So I'll do a little here and a little on there because I like to creep up on this. It's easy to cut off too much and all of a sudden you got this really narrow snout on this bear. So this is easy enough. So I can just flip it back and forth. I don't have to worry about one side is the right side, one side is the left side, but I'm just going to creep that back a little bit every time. A little more each time. Try to keep them symmetrical. If I take a lot off one side, I'll take about the same amount off the other side, just so I know that I'm staying a little bit symmetrical. Any of you out there following along with the carving, are all of you going to do the librarian bear, or have some of you come up with your own ideas? Unmute yourself and tell me what ideas you got for doing yours if you want to. It's not a requirement.
I have mine nearly finished.
Did you what did you do have your bear doing?
Nearly finished.
What is it nearly finished like the librarian, or are you going to do something else with your bear?
My bear is nearly finished. I have painted him today.
You painted him today?
Yes.
Cool. Why didn't you teach the class then, Peter?
I went ahead.
You said you went ahead and did what?
I went ahead carving, and later on I painted him. I made the bookshelves.
Right.
And I've painted him, and I make some wooden books.
Oh yeah, you showed us that last time, didn't you?
Yeah.
Checking myself as I go along, making sure I'm not taking too much off of one side to the point where I can't take off the same amount on the other side. But I'm almost back to where I got the snout sort of shaped, if you can see that. And that's what it looks like from one side. You take a little more off of this side, so we'll do that real quick. Hopefully you've had some nice weather, and if you haven't, hopefully you've had some time to carve while you didn't have nice weather. I got an email from a friend of mine. He moved from here in Boise out to Lincoln City, Oregon, right on the coast. They have their show in January. It's kind of a hard month to do anything on the coast because it's really wet and cold out there, and it was all icy. They had, I think, during his shift of manning the door, they had 9 people come in 4 hours. So we're not at that point yet, but we've had about a foot of snow altogether here in the last few days. So I got a small electric snowblower, and it does well if the snow is not more than about 4 or 5 inches. Any more than that, and it's like it it doesn't want it, the shroud is not big enough to go up above about 4 inches. So I got that side done. I want to do the back ones too. I want to do it, sorry, not do the back ones, but do it to the back of the ear. So what I've done is I've drawn in where I want the ears to be. I always talk about symmetry, and I always like to keep symmetry, but that doesn't mean I'm a slave to symmetry. But on these, I'd like to have the ears about in the same spot on the head. Because while I can get by with the ear a little bit forward, I can't get by with the ear that's higher than one, like one ear is up here and the other ear is down here, or I can't have one ear here and one ear way back here. So there are some things that I have to be sort of a slave to symmetry, and I just want to make sure I'm doing that. So I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to score the back. I'm just going to make a stop cut in the back, that back line. Now's the time to adjust your lines if one is bigger than the other or longer or too squished together. I'm just making a cut right down along that back line that I cut, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. Go straight down and do that as many times as you need to get about 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/4 at the most. And then I start carving the ear from the back. It's easier to make adjustments from the back than it is from the front, because the front isn't really clear on what you're going to do. So I'm going to carve from the back of the head to the front. And I'm staying within those lines that I made. Okay, same thing over here. So lines on the back of the head are lined up fairly the same depth, same height, same width on the ears. Now I'm going to do the front, and again, these are not going to be great big ears. If you looked at different species of bears, they don't have really big ears. Some of them have bigger than others. Some of them have smaller. Some of them have the ability to really lay them down. But I'm going to go from the front. I'm going to take that front edge off, that corner right there. Sorry. Take that corner off and go all the way back to where the ear is going to be. Because that's the eye socket. That's going to be rounded this way anyway. So I can come back in here and start rounding it while I work on those ears. Show you what I've ended up with so far. A little bit of an ear there. I'm going to take off a lot more, but I just got the ear started. Okay. So I say do a stop cut, and usually we do a stop cut like this. On something like this, you can do the exact same thing where you put your blade right there, just push in. Same thing, but it's less likely for me to hurt myself this way than if I do this and all of a sudden I hit my finger. So it's a little bit easier to do it that way, and it allows me to get in here and start to trim that eye socket back, or that eye mound. I must not have cut very deep in there. Here we go. I'm using my Helvy. This is the only Helvy I have left. I've sold the other ones, not because I didn't like them, but because people come along and they start carving and they say, gosh, it's going to take me 2 or 3 years to get a Helvy. And I had an extra one at the time, and I went ahead and sold it to them because I had the exact same knife from a different manufacturer that I used a lot more because the handle fit me better. So anyway, this is the big 2-inch Hagen knife that I got from Rich several years ago. So the funny thing is I hear these people on Facebook, and they're not real happy that they're going to have to wait 15 months. And then I showed somebody in our club was saying, yeah, I don't want to wait 15 months for a knife. And I said, well, I showed a picture of the CCA meeting in September, and there was a table that Rich had where he'd had knives in there, and he and Ducky were working the table selling knives. And I just by looking at the picture, there must be 300 or 400 knives on that one table. every handle that you would want, I would imagine, every length of blade. I don't think he does V-tools or gouges, but it was, for someone who really wants a Helvey, that would be a dangerous show to go to, because you could have just about anything you want and not have to wait 15 or 18 months. Now, that's expensive. If you're going to I want to say South Carolina, if you're going to Colorado for the CCA, then you're going to spend airplane fare, hotel room, dinner, whatever. So for that, it might be worth it to wait 15 months to get one of those knives directly from them, rather than spending another $500, $600, $800 for airline tickets and the hotel room and food and whatever. So, but it was just like it was like a candy store for we addicted carvers, because
I've bought some too, Eric.
I'm sorry.
I've bought some too, Helvey knives,
How long did
and I
it take?
put them together myself.
Oh yeah, I saw those. You had that picture up there. And you're doing the class with Ryan right now, aren't you?
It's finished.
You got all your carvings done? I saw your Becky. You sent me a picture of it.
Yeah. I have Becky and Pixie done. Now I'm working on the librarian.
There you go. The librarian lady or the librarian bear?
Lady.
Gotcha. I told you Ryan was a good teacher.
He is a good. I signed in for this next class in August.
Awesome. What class is that?
Handsome cowboys and heartthrobs. Do I pronounce it right?
I didn't hear what you said.
Handsome dudes and heartthrobs.
I hear the handsome dudes. I don't know the other part. Hard what?
Heartthrobs.
So again, I'm still just working on, this is part of the shaping part, what we like to call the hogging part, where we're just getting the bulk of the wood off in some place that we didn't want. Probably could have gone with a scroll saw and take it off, or a bigger tool. You could use a bigger tool like this soft V here. This soft V here, Denny piece, and that'll come off just as well. So again, just whatever tool you're comfortable with in removing wood or shaping. Some people like a big, huge knife. I know Chris Hammock likes his 2-inch flexible ones. Gerald Sears carves with bench tools because he takes his carvings, cowboys mostly, and puts them on the bench and vices them down. Okay, we sort of got the shape of a face started. We haven't done anything with the ears. And so what I like to do is they're going to be kind of rounded. So I'm going to draw them on here so I know where I'm going.
I sent it to you.
What'd you send?
The chat to you.
Class?
Class, yeah.
For Ryan?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
In your chat panel.
Okay. I don't see anything in the chat right now. All right, I'll take a look at that later, Peter. Anyway, I got the ears drawn, and I've cut a little bit more over here. I could make them a little bit bigger, but again, these are not Mickey Mouse ears. This is a bear, and actually, I want to move this one in a little bit. I've got it. I'm gonna trim off a little bit, take off what I drew, and come off of there. I want to make that ear a little bit bigger. If you'll notice, I'm looking at it. This side is deeper in this way than this one is. So let me pull that in just a little bit more so that I can see where I've got space to draw some good sized ears in there. That looks a little better. Let me even up the other side. Anyway, I was talking about snow blowing the other day. I've got a small snow blower that works as long as the snow's not too high. And I couldn't get it in between the vehicles, so I had to shovel it anyway. And then after I shoveled it, it snowed more. And I was pushing it over into the driveway behind my wife's car because she doesn't work. She works from home, so she rarely goes to work. Well, that happened to be yesterday, one day in which she had to go to work. So I spent an hour shoveling snow from behind her vehicle so she could get out, only to find out her car wouldn't start. I thought, oh no, I don't want to pay $229 for a battery, but it was actually the battery for the fob. So the key fob wasn't working, so I had to end up replacing one of the batteries. I had a lifetime warranty on the other one because I'd replaced it before. Anyway, I carved out enough room here to draw another ear. And you can argue whether you want the ears to be low on the head, small little pointed ears or whatever. I like that one because when I look at that in the camera and I look at that in the real life here, I like the way it looks. The next thing I'm going to do is right here at the bottom of the snout. I want to take off that triangle right there, and that's just going to give me some shape. I don't have enough wood behind it removed so far to go all the way back, but I'm going to go right in there at that angle just so I can get that snout starting to look like a snout. Other side too. Okay, so I'm starting to get that snout where I want to. I want to cut out in between the ears. I've got this soft V. If you don't know what a soft V is, it's like a V tool, it's not as sharp. And so the V tool that comes to a really sharp point at the bottom of those ears. When you use a V tool, it leaves you a really sharp line as opposed to a soft V. Soft V leaves you a softer line that if you don't like it, you can still recover. But that sharp V with that V tool it's kind of a final sort of cut tool that you really got to be careful with. Let me separate the ears on the back. I forgot to do that. My apologies. I brought the back of the head up to the front of the ears, but I didn't do the space in between them. So I'll take my tool and just separate in between the ears. I'm just separating back here so that when I cut it, I'll have room to have room at the back of the head. So now I'm just going to go straight in the middle of the head. This is where your center line comes in handy. I've cut mine off, so I'm going to rewrite it back on there. Wherever my center line is, right there. And so I'm just going to take my soft V and just cut between those. Because I've got my ears drawn out pretty wide, I'm going to take
Eric, you're out of frame.
Sorry. I'm cutting out in between the ears. So I've got a lot of wood in there because I've got some big ears, and the way they're going to be shaped, I've got to go down quite a bit. So right now we're working on just shaping. So I'm going to remove this wood. So that's what I wanted to do, is separate right between those ears. Now I'm going to take my knife and I'm just going to shape it. And depending on which way you cut, it might come off easily. It might not come off as easily as you want it to. But work on it a little bit. You're shaping that ear right here. creeping up on it. It doesn't. I don't need to remove a lot of wood, but I need to remove enough so that you see that ear right there. If it's hard to see, come to the back of it and remove some more wood, because we're going to round that here in just a little bit. Remove some wood back there so you start to see that ear shape. Okay, I've got a lot of wood out here that I want to take off, and so I have to be careful because some of it is coming up to end grain at the top and some of it is side grain at the bottom, and so I just gotta be careful which way I go because I don't want to lose wood I don't want to lose. But I'm just going to continue nibbling it away and shaping that ear little at a time. I think we're starting to get there. Okay, I'm coming up to the back where I have a lot still back here on the back of the head, so I'm going to start rounding that, and I'm just going to go right up the side of the head, and as I get to the top, I want to carve over to the ears. Come on. Carve over toward those ears on that end grain. It takes a little muscle to get in there, but you see I'm starting to shape that ear, trying to look in the camera at the same time while I'm looking at the wood, and it's not the easiest thing to do. Okay, a little bit more. I like to leave them a little bit big, and I can make them smaller later as we go on because I don't want to have a situation where I lose the side of it, and I all of a sudden.
You're not near other people. They could get you better.
Please remember to mute yourself if you've got your camera on or your microphone on. Okay. So I'm working on rounding this head to the point where I can make the ears round without them being too squarish. So here's where I'm at so far. I've got the head kind of carved, sort of the rough planes of it. You can see the rough plane here for the eyes. They're going to go right here above the nose, so I'm going to bring that back some more. And we got the plane here for the ears. We got the plane for the snout. We got the plane for the jowls. And then we're starting to round the back of the head. Questions so far from anybody? All right, I'm just going to keep going. I'll talk while I go. If you have a question, put it in the chat, and I'll get to it as quickly as I can. And I'm starting to round this other ear now over here. I'm getting some space in between the ears so that I'm getting shape to these other ears. I got to be careful because I don't want to lose it. And I also don't want to not have enough wood to carve some more. Because I carve a lot, but I don't ever finish the carving all in one fell swoop. I'm always going back and doing this and working around. And then I'll come back to it and realize that, oh, I need to take a little bit more off here, a little more off there. And I drew these ears a little bit off. One of them was bigger than the other one, so I'm going to have to carve more than I drew. Not a big deal. I can do that. I'm just trimming this ear so that this one will look about the same size. And because of the head being a little bit different, I'll have to come back over on this other side and make a little bit of changes. All right, top of the nose. Sorry, we were working on the back of the head. So I want to work that back of the head where I bring the knife up to the ears without crashing into the ears, because I need as much of those ears as I can save. Because if I make them too thin as I move around, if I grab one of those ears and push on it too much because I'm holding it a different way, I'm going to lose that ear. And I don't know about you, I have no problem using glue, but if I don't have to, I don't want to. So if I don't need to use that super glue, cyanoacrylate or whatever we want to call it. I use it when I'm trying to attach things. I don't use it when I'm trying to hold things in, but I try to make sure that the glue I'm going to use is not necessarily that visible. I'm shaping the corners of the back of the ear because they're sticking out a little bit, and I want to make some room for me to round that head. Okay, you can see the shape of that head starting to come in. So it's kind of looking like a bear so far. I think this camera focuses up close better than those other ones I was using, so hopefully you can see better what I'm trying to do. All right, I'm going to round that head, and I'm going to try to round it down to the neck. So the neck is going to be somewhere right around in here. At least generally, it's going to be there right here where this cut is. Around the back, around the front, it's going to leave me a back as well. So I want to bring that head down on the back of it. I still not worked on the front of it, not finished with the front of it. So I'm just going to work down to that line that we have for the back in the purpose of rounding it. So if I can round that head, it gives me a good idea about the symmetry of the rest of it. Because then I can figure out where everything goes, and I can figure out where the center line of the back is. And unless I was going to turn his head, this center line goes all the way down between the legs and comes up and on top of the legs up to the nose and back around to the back of the head. And that gives me a good idea of where things are going to be placed. Because it's not necessary to carve everything in, but you got to know where it's at. I've watched a lot of sculptors on YouTube. There's a guy named David Lemon. He lives in, I think, Montana, and he's got a YouTube channel where he gives you snippets of a video that he does and then sells the videos. And he does Native American and cowboys and things like that, and does a fantastic job. But he'll start with the armature, the wire shape of what he's trying to do, and sometimes he's got to put 2 or 3 of them together because he can't make it all out of one piece of wire. He's got to go and add other things to it. But anyway, he'll start with clay and doing the body, and he'll spend 5 or 6 hours working on the skeletal structure. And I don't know about any of y'all if you've ever taken a sculpture class, but I think my personal feeling would be I'm going to give it the shape it's supposed to be, and I'm not going to worry about the muscles and everything underneath it. Although he gets fantastic results and then sells them for bronze for, thousands and thousands of dollars. It's not something I want to do. Not because it's wrong, but because if in this market where we live, it's really hard to sell art unless you already have a name, which means you spent years making art, selling it to people. And so while I have friends that do birds, and they do a fantastic job at birds, they'll get a few $100s for them. Whereas the guy with the reputation in the next town over, or the next town over, the next state, will do the same rough looking bird, and he'll get thousands out of it. Primarily because it's really good quality, but it also has a name on it. I mean, some people buy art for investments. And so if you're going to buy an investment buying a $200 bird as opposed to a $2,000 bird down the road, if you decide, okay, I've seen that enough, I've looked at it enough, so I'm going to sell it, you don't get as much money as you want from Joe Smith next door, or the one in town that's been struggling for a while but just can't get to that point where everybody wants their stuff. So anyway, I like the idea of sculpting. but in reality, I don't need to know everything about the human body. Now, a real artist or a real sculptor, teacher, whatever, might argue with me, and that's okay. But I think I've got, as a caricature artist, I think I've got a pretty good idea of what the body looks like and where I want to go, because I'm not trying to make an exact replica of something else. I'm trying to carve the way I want, and I'll tell a side story with it. So I'm not trying to make a lot of money. I never will. I like what I'm doing, and it turns out pretty well. But I have no desire in trying to carve something that would sell for 20 grand, because it comes with its own issues, and the one who's going to receive that might say, well, I want this done and I want that done, and you're looking at him saying, buddy, I'm already done with this. Right now I'm going back and looking at it critically. I saw that one ear was poking in front of the other one. That goes back to what I was talking about earlier. So I'm rounding up this face structure again, and I'm going to take a little bit more off the snout because I don't want it quite as wide as I've got it, and I want it narrowed up here at the top so I can get the ears in there, so I can fit the face. I've got a sharp edge right here I can trim off from the back to the front. And again, I'm not worried about being a realist. If I was going to really put a suit on a bear, it wouldn't look like this. Even if it was one of those circus bears that would wear a suit, it's probably not going to look anything like this guy. But that's okay. This is going to look like what I want it to look like, because I got a pretty good project, and it seems like it's popular. There's a lot of people that have weighed in and said how much they enjoy the idea. So, all right. I'm going to take out a little bit more in between the ears. I've lowered that forehead down. So I'm going to come in here and shape off a little bit of that ear in the middle. Looks a little better. We'll trim it out right out here. And that's what I'm looking at as far as the face goes. Rough shape to the head. Again, like I said, I'm not looking for realism. I'm just trying to make him look like he's really wearing a suit, working in a library, or if he was the bartender, he's working in a bar. So I still got some sharp edges right around here. I want to trim those out, but I've got what I like as a good profile of a bear. Turn it so we can see it right. And lines are here. When I draw lines, I rarely follow the lines exactly. Again, I'm not a realist. I'm not looking for perfection. In fact, I used to have to tell my students, perfection is the enemy of done. Because if you're looking to be perfect, I don't know about you and I. Well, I know about me. I don't know about y'all. I'm not perfect. I've given up trying to be perfect. My wife tells me every day I'm not perfect, and that's okay. We love each other and care for each other, and that's all that's important. We're good for each other. And what I'm doing is good for me. What I'm doing on these carvings is good for me, and I like that. I'm just trying to make it look like I wanted to make it. I didn't carve underneath the mouth, and so I'm going to carve that, get rounded right behind the jaw. So I rounded that spot right there. Yay, more snow. It's snowing as I look outside. I have a patio right to my left. It's right to my left this way. And in the winter, we put the patio furniture up here and pile it up on the patio because all we do is toss little bird feed out there every once in a while for the birds. But I'm looking out there and I'm seeing 12 inches of snow, and it's still snowing. Yeah. My snow blower will get a workout this afternoon, I guess. All right. Trying to shape the bottom of that mouth right in here. And when I say I'm not looking for realism, I'm still looking for some sort of symmetry. I'll show you something here. When we were at our meeting yesterday, when we meet at the senior center, and one of the things that a lot of our carvers want to do is make everything exactly the same. They want to be able to cut right down through here and open that up, and you can't tell the difference between one side or the other. The worst part about that is you look at eyes, they're not all the same. I mean, I sometimes look and squint one eye and do something with it, or open it up more. This eye has started to get a heavy lid right in here that is not on my other eye. So that is a different eye when I carve it. When I carve one head, this guy is one eye squinted, his left eye over here is squinted, his left eye is squinted, and the right eye is wide open and looking off to the right. You do not necessarily always have to do two eyes looking the same. I don't care whether you're carving a parrot or a pirate. Work on making expressions in your face, because I can tell you, whether you're giving it away as a gift, selling it, donating it, whatever, people love the expression. That's the first thing that draws them, other than the overall, oh, that's cool, that's a blacksmith. People love the different little details on there. The little button has little white holes in it for sewing a shirt. The hand has a horseshoe, and I put little dots on there so they look like holes in the horseshoe. Look at not trying to create perfect symmetry, because it's really hard to do unless you're a professional sculptor. And since it's hard to do, we don't do it very well. And people look at that and say, wait a minute, something's wrong about that carving, but I don't know what it is. And so when I do eyes, I realize on these bears, they're real simple. I didn't try to get too fancy with the bears. I did for most of them, I did a brown background and a black pupil, and then a little white dot for I don't know if you can see the color on the eyes. There's like a raw umber on the back, and then there's a black pupil, and then a little white highlight dot. Holy smokes, we've been doing this for 45 minutes. Yeehaw. All right, so we're getting some kind of symmetry. We're not worried about perfect symmetry. We're not going to split this wood down the half and measure and check everything. We're just looking for something that looks like a bear. And if you compare that bear to a caricature cartoon kind of bear, we're getting there. I'm going to carve a little more on the top of the nose. I want it to go down a little bit. So switch cameras, sorry. I'm going right on the top of the nose, and I'm going to cut off that center line that I got. It's because I'm trying to bring out a little bit more of this eye plane, and part of that is making the nose to where you have more room, a little more room right there, and moving this back and then rounding it. So I'm going to move that back just a little bit. I don't want to take too much off, but on each side I'm going to round where that sharp edge is, where this sharp edge is right here. I want to round this right here. I've got a sharp edge in there, and I want to just take that off a little bit. So do it on the other side too. And then a little bit more down here on the bottom of the face. Okay, right up under those ears, I got to make this part right here a seamless, smooth transition. So I'm just going to trim that up here, the side of the face. Come back down into the bottom of that ear and trim it off. Sometimes I'm always surprised when the cut comes out exactly like I envisioned it, because there's other times when I think, well, that didn't go like I wanted it. Okay. Now this edge right here, I want to just trim that off. And so I'm going to lay my knife in here at about a 45-degree angle and just take that off. Take that harsh edge off. It gives a rounded part. I've looked at pictures of a lot of bears. I was watching a documentary the other day on bears in Alaska catching fish. So you get an idea after watching some of those things. I realize I'm not doing realistic. I'm doing caricature, cartoonish, whatever, but not Yogi Bear. I'm just doing the rounded face of this bear that I'm trying to get. Okay, right around here, I want to put my center line back so I know where the center is. Right down there, right in line. This one's dead. No, it's not. So draw that line from here up over the nose, up to the eye socket, and back to the middle of the head. Now, if you notice, you see that line jogs a little bit to the right, just a little bit here. So it's not a perfect symmetry. That line goes over and then comes back. Don't care. I'm not worried about that. Okay. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just cleaning up where I've got stray cuts or leftover wood. Just getting things a little bit cleaned up, a little bit more symmetrical. While I say I'm not worried about it, I am too. A little more rounding on the back of the head because I still got sharp cuts there that I want to cut off. We were rounding down to the neck, and I didn't get in the middle. And I look back here at the back of the ear, and I've got a lot of stray cuts. So I'm going to clean a little bit of that up by just carving off some of the back of the ear. What I'm really trying to do is round that ear. So here's the ear right here. So what I'm going to try to do is round this from left to right and round it from front to back. I want to go from the back to the front though, rather than front to back, because the back is where the stray cuts were. As I was carving up to it, I kept hitting it with my knife. That's just part of it because I knew a lot of that wood was going to come off, but now I'm taking it off and I'm rounding those ears. Again, I like to leave the ears fairly stout because I don't want them too small, and I'm gonna end up banging into them and breaking pieces of it off. And it's okay to have one ear that looks like it's been chewed by his main rival. This is a librarian bear, so he believes in peace and love rather than fighting. So he doesn't want his ear all chewed up by the rival of affections of the bear in the next classroom over. So I'm just cleaning off the back. I had a lot of stray cuts in here, and I just cleaned those off. Okay. I want to leave that head because it's got a lot of details left, but I don't care about the details right now. I will come to the front of this right here, right under the snout, that chin right there, and I'm just going to take my knife. And I've done all of this with a big 2-inch knife, so don't worry about having to go out and buy a specialty tool. As long as it's a good tool, you can do a lot with it. So all I did was trimmed off that bottom of the chin a little bit. Okay, let's work on this body a little bit. We started on this one arm, and we're at a certain point on that arm where we've got to start making some decisions about what this is going to look like, because how far are you going to push that book back? The arm, when your arm is holding a book, your arm is outside of the book, so we got to push that book quite a ways back into the body. So let's do that. Let's do that first by rounding the back of the arm. We started that on our last video. Hopefully, if you weren't along with us on that video, go look at it. But all I'm going to do is take my soft V. I gotta be careful of all that shoveling snow today and yesterday. My shoulders bother me. So we'll see how we can do this, even though we're feeling a bit sore. So I'm rounding out behind that arm to show where that arm is. Here's the front of the arm. Here's the back of it. I'm just taking off wood from back in there. This is wood that I don't need. It doesn't play a part other than hold the arm up, because I'm going to cut into the body so that I can separate that arm. What I'm going to do, we've got another tool now. What I'm going to do is take a fishtail gouge, and I just want to go in there. It's not what I wanted to do. I do want a smaller knife so that I can make some cuts. Now, I'm going to make some stop cuts in here. I have to be careful, because if I make the wrong stop cut, now I've got a slice and a groove somewhere I don't necessarily need it. There is a shadow and a space in between the arm and the body, so I've got to separate that. But if I go too deep, I'm going to have a hard time. The question is, when I make this cut, am I taking wood off the arm or am I taking wood off the body? Truth is, I don't want to take the wood off the arm, because the arm is going to be thin enough as it is. The back of the arm can be really, really too thin for this big bulky guy. If we aren't careful, they can get too much wood off the arm, and all of a sudden it looks like a pencil line for an arm. So I'm going to go straight in to the wood, and then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to lay the wood along the angle of that arm and take the wood off the body. That helps me to do two things. It preserves the thickness of the arm. That's Chip didn't want to come on. Preserve the thickness of the arm and allows me to remove some of this body. Because if you look at this body's got to have a lot of wood. He's got a big bulge back here that I've got to remove anyway. So I'm going to start by taking it off, and then I'm just going to start using my fishtail gouge to take off some of that wood I said I wanted off. So I'm just going to come back in here. I'm going to go in flat and then round over to the arm, and then I can reverse that and cut that off, because that starts to separate the arm from the body. So you got to be careful where you're taking wood off. I've seen a lot of carvers, they go in and do arms and legs and whatever, and they realize by the time they're done, they've given him legs that are so skinny they won't even support the body. So we got to be careful with that. I'm going to do the same thing underneath the arm. I understand that this is his jacket, and so the jacket is going to be kind of droopy, and the arms of the jacket are usually not very tight. Although I've been watching lately men's fashion. I don't wear suits anymore, but men's fashion is getting to the point where the suits now on men are skin tight. I don't know about you, but I don't want to wear a skin tight suit. I got too much fat somewhere than to wear a skin tight suit. I'd rather wear a jumpsuit, but I don't reckon they'll let me out in public like that. But anyway, I want to leave that arm so that it has room. So underneath it, I'm gonna bring up here and use my fishtail gouge, a very useful tool. And I'm going to bring that space under the arm so that I can leave it still looking bulky up under here. So as I'm bringing my tool across there, I can still show some size to that arm. Okay. Up here at the top, I should have shoulders here. I cut it almost at a really severe angle. Now it allows me to go to the top of that shoulder, go in and back out with my fishtail gouge, so that I'm leaving a ledge right there for the shoulder. I'll show you that in just a minute. Let me get that. And this isn't the only tool you can do that with. You can do it with a gouge if you want to. Just come straight across. It'll give you that profile. But now that gave me a shoulder right there. Instead of it being up and then at an angle, now it up and goes in and comes back out. And that allows me to go back up here and separate the sleeve from the shoulder. All right, we said we started working on the back of that one. We'll do that. If you want, you can do that on your own. If you want to do that over here, it'll be a little bit easier when you do this part, because over here we've got a book to maneuver around. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use a small V tool, smaller than that big one I brought out. And I want to outline the book. So I'm going to go in here. It's kind of hard to go too deep because this is a book sticking out from his jacket. Unless you're hiding it all behind the jacket, that book is going to come, it's going to show some bulk and some size to it. So I'm V-tooling around the 3 sides of the book that I can see. So these are the 3 sides. Here's the top of that book. Here's the front of that book. Here's the bottom of that book. And now that I know where they are at and I like it, come in here with my knife, a short, sharp knife from Pinewood Forge. And I'm going to stop cut right into those grooves. I'm going to make 2 cuts each time. And then I'm going to come back in here and start to take some of that off. I got a fishtail gouge. It's a good thing for getting into tight spots that I'm afraid of cutting off. Yes, Peter, I've seen that mirror trick, and I think it's interesting to look at when you take someone, and especially people that have different hairstyles, when they take their mirror look. It's always interesting to see what differences you have between the two, because you're primarily seeing yourself in the mirror all the time, unless you do a lot of selfies, and that should be mostly for teenage girls, and there are 900 selfies a day. We generally don't have a lot of pictures of ourselves, so we're used to seeing ourselves in the mirror. Well, in the mirror, your left is your right and your right is your left. And so you're right, when you go to look at that, they're not generally completely 100% symmetrical, even on twins. Okay, I'm starting to separate that book out of there, just a little bit. I don't want a big, thick dictionary sticking out of there. He's not carrying an encyclopedia. I don't know, maybe he is. Maybe he found his encyclopedia in the wrong spot in the library, because that used to be a thing. Kids go to the library and do stuff like that to aggravate the librarian. Of course, I had
Bear law.
Huh?
Bear law.
Yeah. I had a buddy of mine when I was in the service. He loved to go into stores and set the alarm clocks to all go off 30 seconds a minute from each other. And so he'd set one for 104 and one for 105, 106, 107. And he used to do that, and all of a sudden they start going off, and the clerk runs over there to turn it off, and then a minute later another one starts, and another one starts, and used to just drive the clerks nuts. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that. That just seems like it's rude. But anyway, I love my librarian friends. I don't think I've ever worked at a place where I didn't like the librarians. We have not to get political, but we have a issue here in the state of Idaho where they're trying to take books out of the library, which I agree, some books shouldn't be open on the general shelf for just anybody to get. You don't want your 4-year-old grandkid reading a book about, I don't know, pick a subject. But we're having a lot of people that are burning books and wanting to charge librarians a healthy fine and jail time for having books in the library that they disagree with. So anyway, sidetrack there talking about librarians. I've never met a librarian I didn't like, so didn't want to be one. I was always more active than sitting behind a desk all the time, but I had a good friend of mine. He just recently retired from Idaho and moved back home to Washington, and he and I stay in contact with each other and send each other goofy stuff because we were both teachers. And just trying to shape that book so that it really looks like a book. Maybe it's a pamphlet, could be a flat piece of paper. As Bob Ross would say, it's yours. You make it any way you want. If you want a big tree, make a big tree. You want a big book, make a big book. Okay, so I've got the back sort of shaped. I want to work on the front. I got to take a little bit more off of this arm so that it looks like the book goes underneath that arm, and a little bit more off the bottom. The difficulty with this is when you carve an arm, you want to carve an elbow. You want to carve an elbow to show that the arm is bent and there's room down in there. When you put a book sticking out of there, you can't go real deep. It doesn't look real. You got to fake it. And in this one, what we would do, we're deep there. This is probably as far as we want to go. Now, all I'm going to do is take a little sliver off here at an angle, sort of a flat plane thing, cut that off, and go from the bottom sleeve to the elbow, cut that off. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back in here and clean up this corner, and I want to show you a little tool that somebody made for me years ago. And if I wanted to, I could sit here and I could cut in there and cut in there and cut in there, and pretty soon I'd have a pretty deep hole, but it wouldn't look realistic. Here's a tool that someone made for me, and it is basically a plane. It's an old screwdriver, I think, might have been an old carving tool, Miller's Fall. Anyway, there's an angle here, there's an angle there, and there's an angle there. So you've got, find my marker. You've got an angle that goes straight up and then it curves in just a little bit. Over here it goes straight up and it curves in quite a bit, almost like a skew. And then here it goes flat and then plunges down that way. And so the usefulness of this is if I put this in the arm of that carving, I put that right in the dead center of that and I push in. And I go back and forth, up and down, up and down. And then I do the same thing to the top of it. I push that into there, up and down, forward and back, forward and back. And what that does is that creates a little shadow. You probably can't see it very well, but it creates a little, let's see if I can get myself squared away here, little shadow right in there so that it looks like there's a space in between those two. Maybe it'll show better over here. Let's see if we can get it in there. Right in there. See that corner, that dark spot in that corner? It gives the illusion of a shadow, which gives the illusion that right in your arm, I got my arm crooked here, I'm not carving down into here, but I'm creating a little bit of a space by separating those wood fibers. And so there's a little negative space back in there. Even though I didn't carve it, and I don't have to get in there and chase it with my knife and try to get all those fuzzies out. And so it's a useful tool. I wouldn't know how to tell you how to make it. But it basically looks like that. It's almost like a screwdriver, and it doesn't even have to be a carving tool because you're not carving anything. You don't have to temper this. Could be an old screwdriver that you did that with, but you give it one angle going up, one angle going to the side, and one skew to the top of it. Anyway,
I wrote it down. What that
gouge.
is?
Yeah, it's a gouge. I get it. Somebody, I'm not advocating you take a gouge.
It's for metal carving.
Yes. Well, no, this was made. This was made by, I made this, and it wasn't made for metal carving. And Miller's Falls is a carving company. They make carving tools. And so I'm not advocating you take one of your good tools and grind on it to make this thing. Find an old screwdriver and make that out of that because it's a useful tool. I don't have to chase fuzzies down in there now, but I've got what looks like a shadow that promotes the idea that there's a book in there. All right, I want to separate a little bit more because I've got a really fat body on the front. Peter, you asked about my hat. I don't make hats. I don't have hats made, but there's a company called Ink Pixie. I write it on my sheet here. For those of you that want those of you that want to order your own stuff, I have a apron that I ordered from them with my name on it. And I have a hat that I ordered from them. The hats are about, altogether it was $30.94. Inkpixie.com, you can see it right there. And they make all kinds of individualized beer mugs and shirts and aprons and sweatshirts and hats and whatever. So if you want one of those, I mean, I'd feel honored if you put Eric Owens on it, but I wouldn't expect that. Put your own hat on, put your own name on there. Peter Voot Carving or whatever you want to put on there. But inkpixie.com, I've ordered quite a bit of stuff from them over the years. My wife and I wear t-shirts in the summer when we're doing a show in the summer, and it has Eric Owens Carving on it. And they always look at us like, how can both of you be Eric Owens? Well, I'm Eric Owens and she's wearing my shirt, so that's okay. Anyway, get back to my, here's where we're going. Here's that.
Thank you.
Yeah, here's that bear that we're working on. You see the book right there. Here's one that I've been working on for the last few days. So you see I made the arm real skinny. I took too much off of the bottom. So I'd have made the other side skinny too. But we're going to try to shape this jacket. We got about a little less than an hour. I'll try to shape that jacket a little bit. So we're at the point now where we've drawn in and carved the book. But now that leaves us a hump here, which we don't really want. So I know I talk a lot about my fishtail gouge. I use these things a lot. I've got 3 of them. I've got that one from from Drake. I've got that one from Flex Cut. I have this one from Stubai. And the good thing about the Flex Cut is that it's flexible. If you can see that flex. I wouldn't do that with this one, although it's fairly stout. This is one of the oldest tools I've had from Drake. And then this one is really, really thick and heavy. So it will take off a lot of wood. This one will take off. Anyway, it's a little bit longer than these other ones, and so it can be a problem getting into places. But you know, we can make it work because we're good at what we do, right? Everybody said yes. I'm going to assume everybody said yes. All right, I'm using this gouge right above where the seam of the sleeve is, and I just want to take that bulk off in front of there. I want to basically bring this plane down to a little bit below where the book is. So it's not below it as in location, but below it in thickness. Now I've taken some of that off. I'm going to come back in here with my knife now that I can get in there. I'm going to take a little bit more of that off. So I'm just rounding the top of those shoulders so that I can give myself room that if I want a turtleneck, I got room to put a turtleneck in there. If I want a collared shirt or a jacket, I can do that in there. But it just gives the body a little bit of shape. I'm going to do the same thing to the front of the jacket because I got these things sticking up. And I'm just taking bulk off. And right now I can go way, way, way back on this and make him a really thin bear. I think a skinny bear looks kind of funny, but I had a guy bring me some bear sausage one time at a store I worked at. We struck up a friendship. He was a customer. He asked me one time, he says, told me he was going to go bear hunting. And I said, you can hunt bear. So you can hunt bear twice a year. You can hunt bear in the fall, bear in the winter, or bear in the fall and spring. And I said, well, what's the difference? He goes, well, a fall bear is fat and got a lot of fat in it. And a spring bear is thin because they just came out of the den. Very lean meat. The things you learn. I mean, I've never been a bear hunter. So the things you learn from people that are willing to, willing to tell you everything they know about a particular subject. Whether you want to know it or not, I mean, it's nice information to know. But I never knew that the bear, I know the bear hibernates. I didn't know that they would, their metabolism went so fast that they'd wake up really, really thin and no fat on them. So, in other words, don't get in the way of a bear coming out of its den in the spring because you just might be the next meal. Okay, we're just shaping that jacket. remember that there's an arm with a hand stuck in it down here in this pocket right here. So we can't make it real flat. We got to make it bulky, kind of a bulge to it. So this area right in here, I got to make sure that I approximate what looks like a bulge. So I'm going to do that by taking off above it, above that bulge, and I'm going to take off right here where the sleeve, the bottom of the sleeve is. I'm going to make a stock cut right in there. I want to take a little bit off, a little sliver off right there at the bottom of that sleeve. Shape it a little bit right underneath that book. Shape it at the bottom so it looks like the pocket goes a little bit longer than the sleeve does. So just take off that triangle right there. I didn't go deep enough to it. And now I have the dynamics there of what I need to do as far as bulk, because back here at the back of the hand, I can give a little bit of a bulk there. I don't need a whole lot, but I just need the impression of a bulge there. And I'm going all the way out to the edge, because when your man puts his hand in his jacket, a lot of times that jacket will roll over. And so you're just going to roll over that edge, leave a little bit of that bulk. You don't need a whole lot, but you need a little bit. And if you can't get enough bulk here, move some of this leg back. There, we got a thick leg right there. We can take some wood off here that would make this look thicker and give you more of a bulge. I think it works as I've got it. And then we'll just add a little bit more cuts here. So that I'm going around it and making that stick out a little bit higher than the jacket around it. Okay. Shaping the arm, I did the shape of the inside of the arm. I did the shape of the inside top. If we do like John Overby does or Gene Messer, either one, we want to give it some wrinkles. I'm going to go straight in and remove a sliver. I want to go straight in and remove another sliver. Depending on how that looks, you can do a third one. Too much is too much, so be careful how you do that. But basically, I've got roughly 3 flat plane wrinkles. So people ask me, what style do I carve? I say a lot of it is modified flat plane, because what I've got is wrinkles, but not too many. I don't have wrinkles everywhere. I've got wrinkles in a few spots, and there are those wrinkles. Okay, shape the back. Again, we're taking wood off the body and not off the sleeve. So I'm going to take a sliver off right there, and it indents that arm away from the body. Do the same thing up here. Cut, sliver, and separate the arm from the body. I've got a lot of cuts in here that I made with that soft V-gouge, so I'm going to take those out because those don't look right at all, but they were necessary to get that wood off. I'm going to come in here and just take a little bit of wood off to make it look like it's not quite so too many wrinkles. And I'm going to do the outside of the bottom of the arm with a modified flat plane cut. I don't need many cuts here, but I need enough so that it looks like his jacket, and then remove all these other cuts back here at the bottom. Clean your carving up with stray cuts and pieces left over. Some of my carvings I put an elbow patch on there. See the back of his arm there? It's got an elbow patch, you know, kind of like the college professor with his elbow patch and his corduroy jacket or whatever that looks like. I sometimes I put those in there depending on what I'm looking at in terms of what kind of bear is this, what kind of, is he a professional, you know, what is he? So trim off a little bit of wood above that shoulder, take off those marks. So what we're going to do now is mark the sleeve where it attaches to the coat. So you got a sleeve from underneath the arm, back here, over the shoulder, and we would make a U-gouge or a V-tool cut right there, not a big V, to show the seam separation between there. You can also do that with a pattern wheel. Can't remember exactly what they call them, but it's a punch wheel. If you're a sewer, you know what I'm talking about. You roll it over your pattern, it makes an indentation, and that's what you use as the line for your knitting, your sewing. This is the same thing. I could do that with a very small punch wheel. It doesn't really look like what I want it to look like. The bigger the tool you use, the more detail you get, but it doesn't quite work so much here. Here we have to figure out how far over this jacket is going to come, because is he wearing a jacket that he's got his hands in the pocket? What does that do to the front of the jacket? Does it pull it away? Anyway, we've got it started here underneath the arm. So we're just going to follow that line here. And it's going to go up to the edge of the neck. So there's going to be a shirt over here and a jacket over there. So I'm going to take a V-tool on my Stubis. And I started doing that cut down here. I'm just going to follow that as well. I'm starting to separate that jacket from the body. I'm not going to do much other than outline it, because these two sides have to work together. I talk about symmetry and some things not really working. In this case, what we don't want is the bottom of the jacket over here, up here, and the bottom of the jacket over here, down here. So we want to make sure those are fairly symmetrical to each other in terms of the placement and the size. We don't need one bigger than the other, and we don't need anything too out of whack. Follow that all the way around to the middle of the legs, show where that jacket is. Okay. We've ignored the other arm, and so here here's some of the wood here that came from the original milling cut. It's still yellow. I'm gonna trim that off, and we'll give that arm just a few more indication of a few more wrinkles. We don't need many, but we do need a few. When I go to do wrinkles, one of the things I like to do is use a bigger tool, because using a small tool, you can really put in way too many. I'm going to go ahead and follow that line for the seam of the jacket over the top of the shoulders, down to where it goes underneath the arm, and tucks right in that hole that we created. Okay, so now when I go to do gouges, this is or not gouges. When I go to do wrinkles, this is a suit jacket. They're fairly thick. They got an inner lining, and they're usually made out of wool or something heavy. So you don't need a lot of small wrinkles. You won't get a lot of small wrinkles out of a jacket like that. So some of this, using a bigger tool and pointing them where you would see the wrinkles. Wrinkles radiate away from a tight spot. So from the knee, wrinkles radiate this way. From a shoulder, they radiate from the shoulder, they radiate from the top of the shoulder down to where the arm is, because that's where the fabric is going to get stretched. There's a neat book about carving wrinkles. If you ever have a chance and you're going to carve a lot of wrinkles, it's a useful book to look at. It's more of a reference book, though. You're not going to sit down and read it from cover to cover. You're going to use it as, okay, what happens when I sit a guy down in a chair? What happens to the wrinkles on the jacket or the shirt or the pants? Useful information to know. I bought mine years ago when it was fairly inexpensive. I imagine that thing's about $30 now, and that might be hard to swing for a book that you'd use just for reference and just for looking at, because a lot of the things anymore you can find on the internet. I hate that, because I've got the idea for about 6 or 7 books, and Wood Carving Illustrated, Fox Chapel Publishing, and I agreed about 2 of them, but then they said they weren't ready for them yet, and I've been waiting a few years to hear back from them. So don't know that they'll ever happen unless I self-publish, but I got ideas for several books that I want to do, and we'll see if it actually works. So I think for the most part, we are done with this arm. We would do the exact same thing on the other side. I'm gonna separate this book just a little bit more, because it looks like it's not separated enough to look like more than just 2 sheets of paper. Besides, I wanted to add a few details to it, and those details are a real tiny V. I don't know how small a V you have. This one I have is really, really, really little. It's a Ramelson, if you've ever heard of them. They're the ones that have the reddish handles. Anyway, I'm going to come in here in the front of this book. I'm going to make a few scratches so it looks like there are pages. I'm not taking off a whole lot of wood. I'm doing enough to make it look like there are individual pages in there. I'm going to do that across the top and bottom as well. I don't need much. This isn't a very big carving, so spending a lot of time, hours on details for something on a small carving like this, it'll drive you nuts. So I'm just going to give the impression of pages. I'm not trying to carve actual pages in here. So I'm just going to scratch a few lines in there, scratch a few lines in there, scratch a few down here, and we've got that arm done. All right. The next one should be fairly easy, but let's get some of this bulk off the back of it. So whatever wood removing tool you use to take off a lot of wood at any one time, I have I don't think they sell this anymore. It's an OCC tool, but this one's good because other than carving spoons, I can come in here and this thing relieves a lot of wood, and it doesn't give me a straight line. It's a little bit curved. It's got a little bit of a gouge to a little bit of a profile to it. It's number 7, and so this will come in here. When I do Christmas ornaments, I usually hollow out the back or take a lot of bulk off the back, simply because it removes a little bit of weight. Although a basswood carving ornament doesn't weigh much, it removes a little bit of it, and it also gives me a flat place to sign it without signing it on the carving itself. What I personally don't like is picking up an ornament and seeing there's a Santa Claus hat and they've signed it on the hat. I would rather prefer to see them sign it in an inconspicuous place where you can still find it, but it doesn't become part of the carving itself. So we'll just sit here. I'm looking at the watch just to make sure. Worried about snow. We weren't supposed to get snow this afternoon, and I've already shoveled more snow than I want to fool with. So anyway, that's the worst thing I got to deal with today. It's going to be a great day. Anyway, all I'm doing is just rounding out the back a little bit, trying to give it some kind of shape. And then I'm going to go over here and work on the other arm and see how much we can get of that. Okay, that one arm we had a lot to consider because we had the book to worry about. And so this one we don't. And so what I'm going to do is start by giving it some shape. I want to take off this real sharp corner on the back because I don't need that wood right there all the way up to the head. I'm going to do that here at the bottom, down to the bottom where the coat is going to be. So just like on the other side, the coat comes down here and rounds, and we've started a little bit of it, although we can go a little bit higher with it. So that this will be the pants, and this is the jacket. So the other jacket is about the same placement. We'll bring it down just a little bit more, back over to the middle where the pants come in. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to I talked about dots, all these 2 dots here, 2 dots here, 2 dots here, 1 dot over here. So we talked about where we got to make those dots to make sure we've got the same spot, and we drew those in the last time. So I'm going to go with my fairly stiff knife right in the upper arm, the inside of the upper arm, and I'm going to make about 3 or 4 deep cuts. I'm going to come back to the bottom of the inside of the arm, and I'm going to make another 3 or 4 deep cuts. Once I do that, I'm going to come back and I'm going to cut those. I'm going to cut those chips out that I just made. So now I've got the outline of an arm. Okay. I want to do the same thing to the back, but I don't want a real sharp cut back there. So I'm going to take my soft gouge, and I just want to remove those lines that I put in. Again, I'm removing the wood on the body. I don't want to remove the wood on the arm just yet. So I'm laying this off to the side, going in there fairly deep. And I'm doing the same thing on the bottom arm here, bottom of the arm here. I'm going to go in, I'm going to follow that. I've made a soft cut, so if I really don't like it, I can move it, and I don't have to worry about a sharp line that I put in there. But I'm just shaping the shoulder and the arms here. That's all I'm doing. I've talked for 45 minutes. Any questions? We still got about 30 minutes left. I don't want to cut you off. Just want to give you some time to answer questions. Can you see if the grain goes up or down? On this thing, the grain is going up and down. So here's my general rule for grain. I'm making the grain run the longest dimension. So if it's a dog and he's like this, my grain would run this way. If it's a figure standing up, the grain is running here. The problem comes into is when you have different grains. So what if I have him bent over? The longest dimension of the carving should be where the grain runs. So if he's bent over, I would have the grain run from the bottom of the shoe up to the point where he bends over. It would still go over, but now the grain is going to go a different way. So if I'm going to do all of these bears, I'd do it standing up. My cowboy that I showed you earlier, the grain runs from the feet to the head. And that's the way I generally do most of my carvings, is the grain runs through the longest dimension. Now, if you're doing something like a dragon and it's twisting and turning, good luck. That's just going to be one of those things you just have to work through and navigate. But on this guy, the grain is running straight up and down because that's the longest dimension. Now, you get a lot of carvers that don't like carving arms sticking out like this, and so unless the hand just comes barely past it. And I've done a lot of those. I have one laying here. Here's a blank that I've cut out because I did a class called the Generic Cowboy. And what I mean by generic is that everybody takes the same blank and makes whatever you want out of it. And so this is the head. Here's the neck, or the whatever you want to make of them. Here's where the hands and arms go, and here's the feet. So real generic kind of thing that you can have the hands sticking out all the way out to here where they're holding something, or they can wrap around the front like they're holding their belt. But still, the grain runs here. When I start carving on an arm, the arm that comes up like this, the grain runs this way. When I start carving here, I'm carving this way, but the grain is going that way. So you have to watch the particular project you're doing. It's going to depend on the project. It's not just about grain always runs this way. Grain changes. And even using, this is fairly new basswood, but it's not real heavy, and it's not as light as I've seen it. It's not as white, it's a little bit yellow. So you have to worry about the grain. If your wood is hard and it's strong wood, you can carve across the grain and leave an appendage sticking out, hands or whatever, makes it stronger. But I see a lot of people where they glue it in there. They make them, look at Lynn Dowdy and several others. They'll make the arms stick out this way, or they'll make the arms stick out this way. So the guy's standing up there and he's got his arms sticking off here. That's a personal choice. I can't tell you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way. That's a personal choice. But the rule of thumb that I follow in terms of carving figures, most of my figures are standing up. I've done a few where they sit down, and that's different. When they sit down, you can have the head here, the body here, and then the legs sticking out, and then the feet right here. You can do that where the grain runs this way, this way, this way, and it runs this way even though you're carving that way. So that's why some people, they would do the head separately, they would do the legs separately. And some people like doing it that way and attaching them together. To me, it's hard if I was doing it this way and I had a glue line here and a glue line here and a glue line here or here. Those are kind of hard to hide because depending on the type of glue you use, it may leave a line that doesn't take paint. If you use dowels or screws or whatever you're using, metal dowels, wooden dowels, it's a little bit easier, but matching those dowels up is tricky. You've got to have the experience of doing that. But the grain direction just depends on your carving, and it depends on your skill, and it depends on your desire. Maybe you want it all to be that way. I got it. I understand perfectly. But I don't like having a carving made of 4 or 5 different pieces. Now, granted, this guy has a head and the body. He has an accessory, the hammer. He has a horseshoe in his left hand, and then in front of him is the anvil. And so the body doesn't have several pieces. The carving does. Here's a hardwood base. Here's a piece of pine as the floor of the workshop he's working in. Here's a piece for the cabinet. Here's a piece for the anvil. Here's 2 pieces for the horseshoes. Here's a piece for the hammer, and then the head is separate. So in that case, for me, that makes sense to have separate pieces on this one, but I wouldn't cut these arms off or make it this way and then glue the arms on, because to me, that's a lot more work than just working with the grain. Grain on this runs down. The problem with that is that you want the hands, grain runs up and down. When you go to carve the fingers, now you're going across the grain that way. So, again, all right, good to see you, Dale. Thanks, hope you come back. The thing about these is just entirely up to what you want to do. How are you going to do that? How are you going to carve it? It's a personal thing, and it's a skill level thing. I hope I answered your question there, Peter.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to start working on this other arm. We got the other arm. Start to say that looks like it's a little more finished. We got this other arm over here. We started doing that. We started carving, taking off. Better get back to the camera I need to be on, right? Again, we're removing wood so that we can separate that arm. And if you remember, we did this on the other side, and then we came in with a fishtail gouge and separated that arm from the body. Okay, got that arm separated. So I'm going to come back here with my fishtail gouge and start to remove some wood. I want to make that one cut that I talked about where I have to decide whether I want to make the cut come off where we're removing wood from the body or the arm, and I really want to remove it from the arm, or from the body rather. So I'm going to move back here 1/4 of an inch.
Out of focus.
It's not out of focus, it's out of frame.
Out of frame, sorry.
It's okay. Got it. So I'm making those cuts that we made earlier, separating the arm from the body. So I'm just going to come back in with my fishtail gouge, start to remove a little bit of that wood. I'm just trying to separate that arm so that I've got some of this bulk off the back that I don't necessarily need. So we'll come back in here with another gouge. I don't know if you guys have ever used File brand tools. I think between them and Stubai, they've got to have some of the best metal that I've seen. The problem is the thicker, heavier metal you buy, harder it is to keep it sharp, because you got to know angles, and you got to know temper and all that. So you got to know how to keep it sharp. These files really last a long time. They're more expensive, so you'll spend a few more dollars on getting the files and getting the stu-by, but it's not much, and it'll last you a lifetime as long as you take care of it. But anyway, I don't use the Hawk tools. I worked with Chris Willock did a couple of videos for him, and we traded some stuff, and I was glad to videotape his stuff. Chris Willock is from Woodcarver's Warehouse, for those of you who don't know him. They just opened up a new store in Rochester, Minnesota. Anyway, they got a lot of neat stuff, and I like using the stu-bys. But then again, I haven't found many tools I don't like using. Not a big fan of Beavercraft, mainly because they asked me to do a review of their tools, and I did, and this tool wouldn't stay sharp, and I said that was my biggest beef with it. And then they ghosted me. I hadn't heard from them since. It was a couple years ago. So, and there's a couple of knives that I don't really much care for, but anyway, we're not on here to talk about what I like and don't like as far as tools. So I got that arm started to separate. I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to start getting out of sequence. Bottom of that jacket. Thanks for reminding me to stay in frame, Peter. I forgot. I get to carving and forget to stay in where my dots are. So thanks for reminding me.
A little bit up.
Yep. So I'm doing the same thing that I did over here. I'm separating the body from the jacket. And so I just followed that line around that I drew. And I haven't gone very deep in here. I still got room that if I needed to shift this over or back, I could do that, because that's easy enough to do. I just come in here and flatten it out. So I lose that groove. And then I really, when I said that, I realized I wanted to move that over to the inside a little bit more. So I'm going to take my fishtail gouge out and move some of that wood. And then I'm going to redraw it farther in. So I'm moving it over about 1/4 of an inch. Old line was right here, and move this new one in here. Just because I didn't want too much here showing out of the middle. Okay. Now from this point, I got to draw what I want. I could go ahead and take wood off. So that way when I go to draw it, I got a better idea of where it's going to go, where I need to put it.
Out of frame.
Thank you. I also have another bulge right here, because this is the sleeve, and I'm going to move this sleeve down to about right here, because I don't like the shortness of it right there. So I'm going to move that down to about right here. There's the jacket, and this is going to be a bulge right in here. So when I carve, I want to leave that wood there. I carve above it and go down and out. Leaves a little bit of a ridge there. I'm going to do it here. I'm going to go in and out. And it leaves a little bit of a bulge right there for that arm. Carving underneath that arm, I want to make that cut right there where the end of the sleeve is. I'm going fairly fast on this one because we did this on the other side. So this is just, when you go back and watch it, you'll see like, oh, we already did that. Separate the jacket here, jacket and the pants. I didn't continue that cut all the way around. And because the pants don't stick out enough around the jacket, we'll cut a little bit more out of there and make the pants look like they fit to the jacket and the plane of that jacket. But we can clean that up later. Again, gonna make that cut right here. I'm gonna go in, and then I'm gonna take that cut out of the body because I don't want to take any more off the arm. I'm looking at these two arms, and while they're not that much different. This one's a little bit bigger than this, a little bit thicker. So I don't want to take any more wood off here. I'll just take it off the body and separate that arm and that body. All right, folks, I'm going to call it quits right there today because we're at a stopping point with the arms. We'll come back and we'll finish up these arms. We'll finish the legs. We'll finish the back. We'll work on the front, and then we'll finish the head. Hopefully we'll get that done on the next one. And if we don't, whatever we roll over to the one after that in February, that'll give us time to paint if we want to paint. If you get a chance to see how I paint, and paint along with me if you like.